Hey guys, I was gonna do a bit where I just repeated borderless reversible baby treatment art for like a minute or two, just to, kind of emphasize how silly it is. But when I pushed record and said those words out loud for the first time, I, all joy kind of just left, and it just felt so stupid. The whole idea of it.
Yo, Clarion Conqueror. Flip it. You really want to see the back of the magic card? There you go, bro. Oh, what? 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 It's the same. But it's just a baby. You know what, Wizards? You guys are sons of bitches. This set is kind of sick. This set is kind of cool. This is a cool card.
I'm almost 40, and the game that I hinge a lot of my happiness or emotional well-being on, thought it'd be cool to, or like that their marketing and research showed that people like me really wanted reversible, borderless baby treatment art.
Oh, yes! Big hit here. Big hit. Also, this guy is never not represented in the most beautiful way possible. Insane hit, $65. Let's go. When you cast the spell Exile, this is just banger. This is just banger, dude. When you cast the spell Exile up to one target permanent, that's one or more colors. Whenever you cast a colorless spell Exile up to one target permanent, flip it. You're f***ing with me. And he's a baby! Ah! I've never seen him as a baby. Ah! Ah! He's like a chibi. Ah! Ah! I'm moving that to the side. I need that in foil now. Oh my god, I need that in foil. What the f***, dude?
Borderless reversible baby treatment art. I don't know. Just kind of feels in keeping with the rest of this year. It kind of sucks.
How are they gonna do this to me? This set bangs, Wizards. You did it. I'm happy. This bangs, dude.
Woo! All right. Let's make a podcast. Oh, hi, everybody. Good morning, and welcome to another episode of Lucky Paper Radio. My name is Andy, and I am here, as always, with my co-host, Anthony, Master of the Eggs, Maddox.
I've mastered the eggs and also other things. We painted some eggs this week. We had a lot of fun doing it. I was trying to think of
the improv classes are going great.
Yeah,
I
got
well.
not a good grade.
Well, he probably made it up on the spot, right? Whoever the teacher is.
Yeah, they just made that grade up.
Oh wow, wow, burn.
Parker, great improv. Doing excellent. You get an A+. We did some batik
Pasunki eggs?
Made some, I don't know, I never properly dyed eggs as a kid, apparently. We always would just
dip it.
We didn't have hot wax and like little hot wax pens, which seems to make all the difference.
It's fun. I've been wanting to do this for years. Literally, I bought a kit and I always forgot about Easter, and then I was like, oh wait, that was a week ago. But yeah, you take an egg, you paint wax onto it where you want it to stay white, and then you dip it in the light color, and then you paint wax where you want to stay that color, and you keep doing that process, and then you rub all the wax off, and it looks beautiful.
Rubbing the wax off was very satisfying.
It is. It's really fun.
Because you just get it a little warm, then it just comes right off. I wish I hadn't broken my second egg.
Yeah.
That was a sad moment.
Well, I got more eggs.
More eggs. No one's going to get that. We can't talk about eggs too much on this episode, though, because this is our Tarkir Dragonstorm cube set review, and that means, of course, we had the voice you've already heard, the beautiful voice of Parker Lamascus. Parker, welcome back to the show for another set review.
Howdy. I made Persian food for Easter, so no eggs were involved.
Very nice.
Did you make a nice tadig?
I did, actually.
Delightful.
With cranberry and rosemary. Came out of the pie pan in one piece. My lab mate is from Persia, and so gave me what he called the only authentic saffron in the world.
Take that.
Okay.
It was pretty awesome. But yeah, it's a quite involved recipe, but very fun.
Huh. I had no idea all my saffron was inauthentic.
Stealing saffron valor.
Yes.
I've got B tier saffron.
Speaking of dyes, actually, saffron being one of the original plant-based clothing dyes produces that beautiful yellow-orange color.
Saffron, one of the OGs. Do not doubt Saffron street cred as a dye.
And indigo is the other big one.
All right,
What
well,
are your favorite dyes, Andy?
thus concludes pigment chat. Pigment.
Well, it's related because we've got the Near East and also some cards inspired by some of those cultures, in some cases ripping them off. So still on theme.
Yeah, we are back on Tarkir, which is actually a planet I don't think we've ever talked about on this show directly, because this is the first set that has come out that takes place on Tarkir since we started making the podcast. So I'm actually curious to hear both of your impressions of just Tarkir as a plane before we get into more detailed stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have strong feelings about it. Not only have we not really talked about it on this podcast, I think that we started playing right after the last Tarkir set. Does
Pretty
that sound
much.
right?
Yeah,
So it
pretty
was like
much.
literally the next set, I think. So I never really have played it, and it's a set that I know is beloved. Like, a lot of people just love the plane, love the lore, love a lot of the cards from those sets. And to me, it's always felt a little bit strange. Maybe it's just like some sets, I think, do a great job of communicating sort of what the vibe of a particular set and sort of what the lore and the story is just from picking up like individual cards. And I think Tarkir hasn't done that as much. Like, I'm like, okay, well, here's a rhinoceros that's attacking. I don't really know how that's connected to dragons or, this guy that loves dragons. So, yeah, it's been a harder plane for me to sink my teeth into.
For my part, I began playing a little before the original Tarkir.
We're
And
getting big dog.
at the time, I was early college, and so I didn't have a lot of time to play with these cards. And I was actually also like distanced from my older, the people I began playing Magic with. So I didn't actually play tons of Tarkir, but I did, pick up some cards and play with my brother. And I remember really loving the 3-color emphasis of the set. At the time, the card we loved the most was Surrak Dragonclaw, which is just this enormous 6/6 flash.
Oh,
And it was
yeah.
like you lived in fear every time your opponent passed the turn with 5 mana. So, there's a lot of good, clean magic in this set, in other words. I also remember at the time not really getting Morph or Megamorph or Manifest, but as the years have passed, I've begun to appreciate how that's part of the block design of the original Tarkir block. It was part of a 3-set block, and in a really unique way, I think, kind of maximized the potential of 3-set storytelling. And it's not just the morph mechanic that displays that. You also have the same characters being shown in the 2 different versions of the present, one where the dragons win and one where the clans win. And so that is, I think, a really cool device to kind of build the world of this plane. Yeah, so I look back on it fondly, not with any like a special detail, but I do like it a lot.
Yeah, for my part, I feel like Tarkir is one of the planes that is the best example of Magic actually kind of creating its own world in a way that is, I think, fairly compelling. And sure, Anthony, I think you were like, oh, what does this stuff all mean? And to me, the world building is never really about the storytelling personally. I don't particularly care about the arc of, who does what and whatever. I just care that it feels like a fleshed out world, and I think Tarkir has always felt like that to me. I mean, honestly, I think you or Anthony saying that you have no strong feelings is the highest praise you could possibly give, because you've had nothing but strong feelings about every set in recent memory being awful in terms of vibes. So,
oh yeah, they've had a lot of bad vibes recently. So yeah, let's focus on that part.
So I don't know. I think it's a plane that is exciting to me. I think gold cards are inherently exciting and fun, and so sets that are based on shards, wedges tend to just have a bunch of compelling designs because it's very cool space to play in. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm excited about the set is what it comes down to. I think dragons are cool, and we should maybe just get into like high level mechanics and talk about some of those. Does that make sense? Most people have other thoughts about the vibes in general.
First, I want to quickly defend myself and say that I do have good vibes about individual cards from the original Tarkir block. And I also think that if you are interested in learning more about the original Tarkir, I think that the YouTuber Spice8Rack has put out the definitive history of Tarkir. And so we can maybe link that in the show notes.
We sure can.
It's a little long, but I would definitely give it a watch if you are curious about the greater world and mechanics of Tarkir. Before we dive into the set review, I think we should explain it a little bit, since some listeners may be here for the first time. At Lucky Paper, we are less interested in the power motivated, like finding the strongest cards in the set. This is the kind of thing that is very popular in constructed set reviews because you're looking to optimize for win percentage. But with Cube can be whatever you want it to be. And so when we source a community set review by polling the Cube community, we're interested in a different question, which is what cards are our respondents testing and how excited are they subjectively about those cards? And that can be for any reason that they want, whether that's power level or art or vibes or, just overall swag. Whatever reason you might have for being excited about a card, we ask you to rank each card that you're testing on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most excited. And so this is really a chance to capture overall community sentiment and overall excitement about Tarkir Dragonstorm.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking we would get into the results of the survey, but I guess the mechanics touches on that because we were going to talk about the mechanics that were not broadly popular in the survey first and then dive into the sort of top cards and cover those mechanics that way. So what were the mechanics that were just not broadly exciting to most Cube designers, Parker?
I think let's start with Harmonize. So an example of Harmonize, and I think the most popular Harmonize card on our results, is Songcrafter Mage. So this is green, blue, and red, so Teamer mana, for a 3/2 creature human bard. It has flash, and when it enters, target instant or sorcery in your graveyard gains Harmonize until end of turn. Its Harmonize cost is equal to its mana cost. So, to explain Harmonize, there's some reminder text. You may cast a card with Harmonize from your graveyard for its Harmonize cost by tapping a creature you control to reduce the cost by X, where X is that creature's power. Then you exile the spell from your graveyard. So it's a little bit flashback. You do get to cast the spell twice, but then it also cares about the power of your creatures. So your creatures can almost convoke or crew, I guess, to reduce the cost of the spell. And you can only tap one creature, but it scales with the creature's power.
Yeah, this is definitely most similar to Flashback, I think, in terms of the texture it will add to Cube environments. It's like Flashback with a built-in cost reduction mechanic, and then accordingly, all of the Harmonized costs are maybe a little higher than you would expect when you first glance at them because of obviously the built-in ability to make it cheaper. So there's also like a new Firebolt, for example, basically, that it has Flashback, but it's Harmonized instead. What do you think of this mechanic, Anthony?
I'm surprised to see so few people testing it because this is just such an open-ended, flexible mechanic. You don't need a cube that's about anything in particular for this to make sense. And they printed, like you said, like a bunch of just bread and butter cards, like here's your Divination with Harmonize, and here's your Bolt with Harmonize, and things like that. So I'm surprised to not see more people testing these cards, and also to see the top card that people are testing not even to be a card with Harmonize itself, but just that grants it to other cards. I mean, maybe this gets draws a lot of attention from people because of the clear parallel with Snapcaster Mage. This combining with the the Harmonize just means you can even target a pretty expensive spell and tap this creature itself and be able to cast something that's fairly expensive. I think this is a totally reasonable mechanic that, is going to play on lots of different axes that I'm surprised more people aren't playing these.
I think the dream with Songcrafter Mage is like, it has 3 power itself, and
right.
So you could spend it for its own Harmonize cost. We're talking about like a 1 mana Factor Fiction kind of thing.
Yeah, that's particularly good with Factor Fiction. That is definitely true. Yeah, I think mechanically, Harmonize does just work. It's very sort of clean and makes sense. I will say that I've been thinking so much about the sort of elegance and resonance of card design because I've been working so hard on Sacred Geometry, and I think this is a great example of a mechanic that just is not resonant. Like, how is it harmony to cast a thing from the graveyard? How does tapping a creature help casting a thing? Like, it doesn't tell a story in a way that is, I think, coherent, which I think maybe is under acknowledged as a sort of factor in people's emotional response to cards and mechanics. I don't think any of these particular cards speak to me, with the exception of Songcrafter Mage. I do like Songcrafter Mage. I think it's pretty cool. And I guess I want to mention, now that we're talking about Songcrafter Mage, it's being tested by 10% of our respondents with a pretty high rating of 6.9. So it is pretty well down the list of cards in terms of popularity, but the people that are testing it are quite excited about it and are expecting to keep it in their cubes for a while. The thing about this card that kind of irks me a little bit, I think speaks a little bit maybe to the lack of resonance of the mechanic, which is just, I don't quite get why this is a teamer card. I mean, I do get why it's a teamer card. They needed teamer cards in the set, and so, teamer has the Harmonize mechanic. And in some sense, I guess Harmonize makes sense in teamer because it cares about spells, which is where you get the blue and red from, and then cares about the power of creatures, which is where you get green from. But mechanically, this is basically just, a variation of Snapcaster Mage, which is a mono blue card. And so I think the only reason we don't see this higher is because it is a full 3-color card, and it is hard to find space in the average cube for an abundance, certainly, of 3-color cards, or even just a handful sometimes, because it is so easy for those cards not to see play in a given draft, and it's hard to have space taken up in your cube by cards that, no deck might be able to cast. And so I think if this were a 2-color or obviously 1-color card, it would be, much higher, perhaps even the most popular card in the set. I think the big thing holding it back here is the 3-color commitment, and even though I sort of get intellectually why this is a teamer card, it doesn't feel like it needs to be a teamer card. Like, really, honestly, nothing about this card feels green at all. So I think maybe that sort of just inelegance of how this mechanic sits is contributing to its lack of broad embrace from the community.
Well, I'd argue that the creature power matters on this card, and that could make it a little bit more green. I know blue also has some cards that care about their own power, but Harmonize is the bigger your creature, the cheaper the flashback.
Yeah, I get that. I just think that in reality, it's just always going to give the discount itself most of the time, because you can tap a creature that has summoning sickness, which this one will have. So if you have creatures that are not summoning sick and you're casting this during your turn, you'll probably want to be attacking with those creatures, activating their abilities. So it's a very superficial caring about creatures' power, because it doesn't really. You don't have to have a board for this to be any good. This card is just good in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. And I'll also say that I think certainly in more powerful cubes, you don't often get spells or an abundance of spells with a huge amount of generic mana in their mana cost, because they tend to not be as powerful. You want a bunch of cheap spells in power-focused environments. And so obviously you can craft a cube where this sort of thing matters more, where you do have a lot of spells with big generic costs, and this discount could matter if you have a 5-power creature in play. But I mean, how many cubes even have a single instant or sorcery that has 5 generic mana in its mana cost? I mean, I guess Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time are the 2 examples I could think of, but those are a little bit different in that they have Delve. Can you Delve as well? No, because it gains Harmonize. You can't Delve and Harmonize, because they're presumably both alternate casting costs, I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a question for Judge Bones.
Oh, good. An excuse to play the Bone Stinger. Woo!
We read some cards, but we got confused. How do they work? We don't know. Oh, we're in trouble and there's only one person we can call. Judge Bones!
Who?
Judge Bones!
All rise for the Honorable Judge Bones.
Hello. This works just fine because Harmonize is an alternate casting cost and Delve is a method of payment, like Convoke or Improvise, so you can use both. That's just fine. I like to think of those methods of payment like the hybrid mana symbol. It's just a way that casting the spell is easier naturally. It doesn't have any kind of non-bow with alternate casting costs like Flashback or Harmonize.
Yeah, also to be fair, there are just not a ton of cards with Harmonize. There are only 10 in the set, and that doesn't include the Snapcaster Mage. So there just aren't a lot of options. And looking through them myself, it's the one that I guess I'm surprised to not see more people interested in is Winter Night Stories, which draws 3 cards, discard 2 cards unless you discard a creature card for 3 mana, and then Harmonize for 5. That one seems like it's pretty strong, and 5 mana is not a lot if you can reduce that by 2 or 3. But then some of the other cards, like the Shock variant, costs 7 to Harmonize, so I can definitely imagine people looking at this and being like, well, I've already got a cube with Shock in it. I like the idea of Shock with this sort of alternate flashback, but it's a sorcery, and how often is that really going to come up when it costs 7? I can see people sort of looking at this and kind of talking themselves out of it. So I guess it's a lot of these little details that are affecting this mechanic.
This is kind of what I mean by that sticker shock, though. I don't think 7 is that high.
Mm-hmm.
The flashback cost on Firebolt is 5, and that happens all the time. But
it looks high.
It does look high. I think in practice, frankly, the Harmonized Firebolt, can it do damage to any target or just a creature?
Any target.
I think in practice, that is probably, in many cubes, a more powerful card than Firebolt. I won't be playing it in the Bun Magic Cube, for example, because it doesn't have the elegance. Flashback is so evergreen. It's so iconic. It is just, the name describes what it does so clearly, whereas the name Harmonize describes, I think, nothing intuitively about what this mechanic does.
Oh, well, clearly each of these cards draws 3 cards.
There you go.
Hey.
Good bit. So yeah, I mean, for those reasons, I'm not on it, but I think, honestly, it's probably a more powerful card. And if you are playing a purely power-motivated environment and you're currently on Firebolt, you should probably instead be on the Harmonized one, because at the point of the game where you have 5 mana, you probably have at least a 2-power creature, and probably more.
You know, this concern that you raise, Anthony, is also my concern with this mechanic. There's only 10 of these, right? And also, yes, it is similar to Flashback, but that means if there's a Harmonized card and a Flashback card and an Unearth card and a Aftermath card in your graveyard, then
Eternalize.
It starts to become really complicated, right? This kind of thing is an easy way to cut back on the attention that your players have to pay to the graveyard. It's like one of my local cube designers, Holly, has chosen to only run Flashback from the graveyard. Or maybe I'm not quite up to date. Maybe it's Flashback and Unearth for creatures. But that means when you look at the graveyard and you see effects that are live from the graveyard, you already know, oh, I know what the costing is going to be, or I know what the interaction points for this are. I know it's a cast trigger, and so my counterspells work against it. But Unearth is an activated ability, and so my counterspells don't work. Like, you can kind of start to build those intuitions in an easy way. If there's this smattering of different graveyard casting adjacent mechanics, it starts to become a lot more taxing. And it just kind of pulls your players' attention away from the really fun decisions of like plotting and counter plotting to deal with these onboard effects. So I think that's definitely like an aesthetic and elegance concern, a complexity concern as well. But then my other issue with this, I suppose, or maybe this is the reason for my complexity concern, is that Harmonize, I don't know, is it really even a mechanic? Like, I know it is, but it's a faction mechanic. It's meant to give the teamer an identity and a play style in contrast to the other 4 factions of this set, right? I don't really think Wizards intends to bring Harmonize back ever.
No, for sure.
And it kind of shows. Like, why spend a non-renewable resource of design space to do something truly novel with the teamer if it's never going to come back? So you kind of, I don't know if it's phoned in or if it's like intentionally derivative so that you can then put it in your commander deck and Harmonize still has a home there. But like, it just is clear to me that we're not swinging for the fences in terms of these faction mechanics. They're meant to support 10 designs and not 20.
Yeah, that's also a great point, that because they're trying to do a whole bunch of different factions, all these mechanics are both in lower volume, but they're also, I would say, fairly low in complexity, at least compared to a lot of the mechanics that we've seen in contemporary card design. And that's probably intentional, because they don't want to have 5 mechanics that are just going to be really complex and overwhelming and take a lot of mental energy to understand, because somebody's going to sit down and need to learn all these mechanics in a draft.
They're also just low in ambition, right? Like, you don't want to burn all of your design space on something that's only going to be 10 designs.
For sure.
It's not a bad thing. It's just a feature of this like heavily factional set design. But it does lead me to be a little less excited about it for my cube.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Parker. I think, honestly, this mechanic does a great job for the role it plays in this set. Because in this context, yes, caring about the power of creatures and spells gives the teamer a very clear identity. And I think in this set, it does just work and is more resonant in some ways. But obviously, we're talking about cube design here, so we're talking about mostly looking at cards in the context of all of the cards ever created. So yeah, everything I said in terms of being critical of the mechanic is truly just in the context of cube, which is certainly not the context the mechanic was designed in. So none of that is intended as like abstract or high-level criticism of the mechanic. Objectively, just observations for our particular little niche of the Magic world.
So you said there were 2 mechanics that didn't make it into the top cards from our survey, right?
At least 2. The next one that is the big one for me is Omens. And the card we'll look at here is the most popular Omen card is Scavenger Regent. This is even further down the list of our survey, only being tested by 8.6% of our respondents with a rating of 6.1. Scavenger Regent is a 3 and a black creature dragon. It's a 4/4 with flying and ward discard a card. And then if you look at it visually, it looks like it has an adventure.
It's an adventure, clearly. I know what an adventure looks like.
It has the exact same frame as an adventure where the text box is split and the left side is a sort of slight shade of the color of the card. And the sorcery here is Exude Toxin. It's X black black for each non-dragon creature gets -X until end of turn. But it's an omen, not an adventure. And what that means is that it's not like you cast the sorcery side of this card and then you exile the dragon and can cast it later. Instead, when you cast an omen, you then shuffle this card back into its owner's library. So you can cast Exude Toxin, and I think one of the things everyone learned about adventure cards when they were first spoiled is that they're largely much better than they look, because every single adventure, like the spell side of an adventure card, also draws a card, and the card it's drawing is the creature you're going to cast. That is not the case for omens. They cast them, and then they go away, and just basically change your future draws a little bit. I think this mechanic is kind of crazy, not for maybe the obvious reasons. Like, the way it plays functionally is like you can cast this as Exude Toxin as many times as you want if you keep drawing it until you want to cast it as a Scavenger Regent, and then it becomes a creature, and you just get to do that. And
yeah, it's much more like a split card than an adventure, where an adventure has this like multi-step play pattern to it. This is just, you get one of the two spells, and then the fact that it shuffles back in is almost kind of trinket text.
Well, but here's the thing. I don't think it is. I think that's crazy. I think people are not quite acknowledging how nuts it is that these spells just shuffle into your library as part of Resolution. I mean, we've only seen this in Magic before in the like Beacon cycle, and maybe a card or two otherwise.
Some big stuff they don't want you to reanimate.
Cycle.
Well, no, those things are when they go to the graveyard, not when you cast them.
True.
And my point is that I have spent a long time designing my Degenerate Microcube and looking for ways to basically, continue to recycle your library. And this just gives you...
All of our brains are broken in specific ways by our weird cube projects.
By our specific cube designs. This effect just gives you a thing that otherwise you often have to commit an entire card to, which is you will never die from mill as long as you can always cast the Omen side of this card and your opponent doesn't have targeted card draw, right? Like, you can get to the point in the game where you're just casting Exude Toxin for 0 every single turn and shuffling this back into your library, and you never lose from milling, which is a crazy rider to have on every single one of these cards. And they also have this effect of, especially the ones that have removal, like Exude Toxin here, there's a couple, or at least one that's like a targeted removal spell, basically, on the Omen side. Means that if you can draw a bunch of cards, and we're playing a 40-card format, most of us here in our cubes, you're just going to continue to draw your removal spells over and over again with increased density as the game goes on. I think these cards are maybe a little bit quietly very powerful, and also maybe very powerful in a way that is not going to be particularly fun to a lot of people, because it's going to result in you just casting Exude Toxin over and over again. The Zenith cycle also shuffles back in. The Beacons and the Zeniths, I guess, are the two cycles that shuffle back in. So yeah, I don't know. I as, again, someone whose brain is broken specifically in the thinking very hard about the sandblack looping your library kinds of decks, I think it's kind of nuts that all of these are split cards that just also have this incidental thing you refer to as trinket text of just, you get to shuffle this back in, which I think in certain contexts is going to be massive, massive upside.
And massive, massive misery. I mean, how fun is it to lose when your opponent is casting, a huge Plague Wind every turn? Not great.
Yeah, it could be awful. I mean, I think we've talked about it in the show before, but one of the things that most commonly can lead to bad feelings amongst your players is very repeated play patterns. Cards that do the same thing over and over again, or otherwise encourage you just to take the same game action over and over again. People will definitely have the sort of life leave their eyes as they watch you just loop Recurring Nightmare and the same couple creatures back and forth, and that becomes the only thing you're supposed to do with your mana for the rest of the game instead of casting any spells you draw. And if these cards are good, I think it may be because they're being played in a context where that sort of inevitability is likely. You get to a point in the game where you're just like, yep, now I'm going to shuffle Exude Toxin into the remaining 4 cards in my library, and good luck ever resolving a creature and sticking it to the board ever again.
It's also really crazy that they printed a Doomsday effect in this set, which is like, I just now put this together, but the card Stillness in Motion, it's way down on our list, but it has you mill cards, and then if you mill yourself out, you essentially make a Doomsday stack from your graveyard. And so you could just like stack with 5 omens and be like, okay, good luck, opponent.
I'm drawing my counterspell or my removal spell every single turn for the rest of this game.
And the downside of Doomsday, which is that you might just die in 5 turns if you can't figure out how to win, is gone because you just...
That's so funny to me. Wow, why did they do that?
I mean, maybe because they wanted you and other players to have this moment of like, whoa, weird, that's funny.
That's ominous as hell.
Yeah, I would love to do that to a stranger on Magic Arena and no one else. If I know them in person, if I need to if I
You're
need
going
them
to
to
have
like me,
another conversation with this person.
right? Yeah.
I don't know. We've said this a million times. I think it's all about expectations. I think that's a very cool thing in a cube where the expectation is that that kind of stuff is happening. But yeah, in Dragons of Tarkir Limited, maybe it happens so rarely that it's just kind of like, wow, I got to see the Northern Lights, and the Northern Lights pissed all over my face. Like, man, maybe it happens so rarely that you're just fine with it because it is so shocking and out of the ordinary. But I think a very interesting interaction. Anyway, I think his mechanic is kind of wild, and the elephant in the room for many cube designers is that, like you said, Anthony, this looks exactly like an adventure card. There is no visual distinction whatsoever. You got to read that little secondary type line that says Omen and the reminder text to know if this is any different.
I wish we could even say you can go get the alt frames for all of the adventures, because there's also alternate frames for all of these Omen cards, but in the last Eldraine set, they didn't print the alternate frames on all the adventures. Like the one time I wanted them to actually print alternate frames, and they didn't do it. Why'd you do that, Wizards?
Got to keep you guessing. Yeah, I mean, to me, that aesthetic concern, this is the kind of stuff that like we care about here in the cube design world that you will probably never hear anybody talking about for certainly any kind of competitive constructed or limited context, and probably not even for like Commander. Like, you probably just play the cards that you like mechanically. Here, I'm not going to put any of these cards in my cube. I didn't even think about them very hard at all because I think this aesthetic concern is a genuine major complexity.
Yeah, that's also the reason I won't be testing any, because I love, my Bone Crusher Giant and my Brazen Borrower far too much to kind of muddle the waters. That said, I do want to make the case for like the best case scenario for the Omens. And we had a hot take addressing this, I think, from Alex and maybe some others. But if you build a cube around Omen, right, or put them in at high density, and maybe you're careful not to put adventures in alongside them, then what does that cube look like? Well, it turns out all the Omens are dragons, or all of them to my knowledge. And so you get to play a cube with a bunch of dragons, which is awesome, very viscerally cool. And not only that, but you don't have to wait around until turn 5 or turn 8 for your opponent to know that you've got cool dragons. You can cast the Omens early and you show your opponent your cool dragon card, and then you shuffle it back into your deck, and you get the excitement of like, oh, has my opponent drawn their bomb again? Am I putting them under enough pressure that they might need to use the cheap Omen rather than waiting to cast their expensive flyer? Those are all kind of cool. And so I like, the heart of this mechanic, which is make an exciting card even more exciting. It's just, yeah, in my personal cube, it's not a good fit, but I can certainly see that it could be for someone else.
Hi, I'm Alex. I just recently discovered your show, and it made me actually really excited to build my first cube, and I just built it, and I'm playing my first draft of it tonight. But the the Omen mechanic, almost single-handedly, as well as the printing of several dragons that can hang with each other in power level, because the power level of dragons is very wide, inspired the creation of a second cube for me, because I thought about making an environment with dragons being really cool. And what I love about the Omen mechanic is it makes your dragons, that are expensive, first of all, be able to be more visible in the earlier turns of the game. It also is a cool effect for dragons to have, this whole shuffling thing. I think it's important to mind your shuffling budget, so maybe don't play them alongside fetch lands. You'll be shuffling multiple times every turn. But it's a neat thing for dragons to be able to do, and it's reminiscent of dragons in D&D, where if a gold dragon lives somewhere for a long time, that place becomes a desert. They reshape their environment, and they have layers. And so as you get closer to a dragon's lair, of course, it's going to strafe you and whatever. So for those reasons, I think the Omen mechanic is really beautiful and kind of a slam dunk.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because these cards are solving a very specific problem for the limited set, which is dragons are these big bomby cards, and they want to make a set all about a bunch of dragons, but they don't want to put 37 drops in the set because that wouldn't make a great limited experience. So this is a way they can say, here's a big dragon, it also is a cheap spell, you're going to cast the cheap spell 75% of the time, but every once in a while you get to play with the dragon. And yeah, like you said, you do get to still see the dragons doing stuff and feel like the dragon is part of the flavor without them just saying like, oh yeah, dragons now exist at 2 and 3 mana in spades. So yeah, I mean, it is not no cube designers that are going to be excited about these just because they have a cube that has a whole bunch of dragons in it and they want to put more dragons in there.
Yeah, I am also glad you brought that up, Parker, because I think this mechanic, in contrast to Harmonize, is so resonant and so cool. Like, people might not realize that the Omen part is that you have to see that your opponent has a big dragon in their deck. Like, the Omen is not the Omen side of the spell. The Omen side of the spell is not the Omen. The Omen is the side of the spell you're not casting, that you get to see that that's present in your opponent's deck, which I think is so cool and so awesome. I mean, honestly, like, why didn't they just template this like channel, like same text box, just give these abilities to cast them from your hand? Or I guess they wanted to be able to counterspell it maybe, which you can't do with channel cards or cycling or something. It's probably the main reason, but if it wasn't for the split text box, I think this is such a cool effect that you get to like reveal this card from your hand, shuffle it into your library, get some effect, and now know that like that big thing is coming back at some point if this game keeps going on.
Yeah, that is weird that they used keyword abilities on these other things. Like, you could also use this kind of like weird frame for some of the other mechanics we're seeing this set, so that is an interesting choice.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure
I guess
why.
they just wanted this to be loud?
Yeah, maybe?
Howdy y'all, this is Catgirl Kibble here to tell you about a card from Tarkir Dragonstorm I'm very excited for, Charring Bite. And 1 in a red for a sorcery, deals 5 damage to any creature without flying. If you're cool, you'll probably remember Roast from Dragons of Tarkir, which does the same thing, except Charring Bite will then shuffle itself back into your library, meaning that you can draw it as many times in a game as you want. I'm really excited about these Omen removal spells because when you cast them, they are not lowering the percentage of your deck that is removal, so that it will become easier for you to deal with your opponent's threats as the game goes on. And being an Omen, it also has the backside of a giant 6-mana dragon that can turn sideways, if that's really something that you're looking for. This card is cheap, it's versatile, and you can cast as many times in a game as you want, and I can't think of anything else that I would rather do.
G'day, this is your Down Under Cube correspondent, Donnie, and I've got some hot takes related to Tarkir Dragonstorm. I am talking to all those people out there who are looking at this Omen mechanic, and you're thinking, what if I run that in my cube, but it's just a regular adventure? I think that is ace, and you should definitely do that. But this could be the stepping stone for you. You could go even further. For all of you people out there, like me, who don't necessarily love Universes Beyond, and the fact that Universes Beyond is going to be most of Magic from now on, you could, if you wanted to, take Universes Beyond cards and go online, and you can find websites where you can make your own cards. You could make your own versions of these cards as Universes Within, or maybe there's already some versions of them as Universes Within cards out there. Then you can print those off, put them in your cube, play them with your mates. No one can stop you from doing that. What if Triarch Praetorian was Mishra's Praetorian? Oh, cool. Now, even further than that, I don't think you should let your dreams be dreams. If you want there to be a black Arc Lightning that distributes -1/-1 counters, you can go on one of these websites and you can make that card. Amazing. You've always wanted it. What's stopping you? The other thing is, when you do go on these websites and make a card like that, don't use AI art like a numpty. Maybe use something with a bit of class, maybe some Dura, maybe some William Blake. Lovely.
Before we get to the top 9 cards from the set, I have a couple other cards I want to talk about that are not in the top 9 and also do not specifically tie into any mechanics. But before we do that, are there any other mechanical things we want to talk about that do not exist in the top 9 cards of this set?
Yes, we do have the existence of hybrid mana, where one of the hybrid costs is 2 generic mana, so aka Twobrid. So Twobrid mana exists on, for example, Rakshasa's Bargain. So this is 3 Twobrid mana in the cost. One is Twobrid black, Twobrid green, Twobrid blue. So you could cast it for Sultai. You could cast it for 2 blue-green or 2 black-blue. Or you could cast it for 4 in a blue or 4 in a green. Or you could cast it for 6 generic mana, right? It turns out to be an instant. Look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 2 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. This is, by the way, tested by an almost insignificant number of people. It's barely above the cutoff, but an average rank of 6.5. And so people tend to be excited about it if they bother testing it. I personally hate it. I find it to look really bad. It's a really tiny 2 there, and so you have to squint at the mana cost. I also hate that the mana value of this card is 6, not 3. That's not obvious to me. It's not obvious to my weekly players, and so often it involves like a judge call or an escalation. If you cascade your Bloodbraid Elf and you reveal Rakshasa's Bargain, it's like, do I keep going or do I cast this?
I quite literally called a judge at Boston Cube Party for one of these new Twobrid cards in a cube, and I was like, what is the mana value of this card? And they said 6, and I said, bummer. And I passed it.
I mean, does that mean these should all be in the Cascade cube?
I don't know. It's this weird like game attribute arbitrage where it's like, depending on what the mechanic is, it does or does not count. As a player who's not a judge and has no interest in the finer rules of Magic, I find it to be extremely boring and extremely cheesy every time it comes up. That said, we do have a hot take by, I think, Spirewinder, who does make the case for Twobrid. I just happen to disagree with them, respectfully.
I'm Spirewinder, and my hot take is that the return of Twobrid mana is the best part of Tarkir Dragonstorm. Twobrid mana was first introduced in Shadowmoor to facilitate monocolored cards and the infamous Reaper King. But we haven't seen them, sans one mythic, since. One of my favorite recent sets, Dominaria United, made use of off-color kicker costs to add more depth to the limited environment to great effect. These cards worked fine when played in their main color, but became more powerful and flexible when combined with another color. Twobrid acts in a similar way, resulting in cards that are accessible to anyone, but are dramatically more powerful when put in the correct deck. This allows players to choose between power and flexibility when they run them. TLDR, these cards are super flexible and ask players unique deck building questions. I can't wait to sprinkle these into my cubes.
Yeah, this is obviously just sort of a workhorse mechanic. They want to get a bunch of 3-color cards in the set, but those are difficult for limited, so this is a way that you can have a alternate, higher, colorless cost, so if you get a little bit mana screwed, you can still make them work. I'm a bigger fan of the monocolored Twobrid cards because they're just like the idea of I want to commit really hard to one color or have this sort of like escape hatch if I like draw my 1 or 2 utility lands. It's just a more interesting story than commit really hard to a 3-color deck, but I get what it's doing here.
There's also the like externality that Rakshasa's Bargain looks like a 3-color card, but it could be a 1 or 2-color card. And this is kind of the same problem that Dam has, and I'm referring to the Modern Horizons board wipe. So it's a black card, but then it has this white overload cost, and if you overload it, it just turns into Wrath of God. And so like it could be played in a mono white deck as just another copy of Wrath of God, but nobody does that because the frame is black. I think in the same way you're gonna have people who, yes, could play 2 and a black green Rakshasa's Bargain because they're in a black green deck, but they don't even consider it because it looks like a Sultai card.
To be fair, I think people do just play Dam as Wrath of God, but I think people also are just putting that in cubes less because it's stupid.
I wish so much that card was just a split card. Like, that would be such a sick-looking split card in the classic, like, Fire Ice style way, where you had just, the removal spell and the board wipe.
And what are the two halves? One is called Dam, and the other half is called Damn!
Dog. But yeah, I cut Dam from the Bun Magic Cube a long time ago because I was like, I literally, when I'm looking at the cube, skip this when I'm counting the Wraths because it does not look like a white card, does not look like a Wrath. It doesn't read in packs. I've seen players just skip over it, be playing blue-white control, complain they didn't get a Wrath, and I saw them wheel Dam, twice around the table. Like, it aesthetically sucks, frankly. I don't know. Some of these decisions, there's so many more factors for Wizards of the Coast making these decisions, obviously, than us looking at them here just for our sort of particular context. But yeah, I think like Omen, I would so much more want to be structured like the card Dam, where it's like, yeah, just give this thing an alternate casting mode akin to Overload, but instead it's Omen mode. And then you have a single card with a basic frame and nothing weird going on. And for cards like Dam, make it a split card. It would be so much more elegant. But yeah, in terms of a Twobrid mana thing, I think that the way that Twobrid mana interacts with Magic's rules engine, to your point, Parker, is a little bit clunky. In other resource management games, there is oftentimes this sort of built into the resource system period, where if you have some resource that costs 1 of something, you could also pay 2 of anything or 3 of anything, basically, in exchange whenever you want.
1 wood or 2 of whatever.
Yeah, this is a pretty common thing in resource management games, and I think that is kind of cool and elegant. And the way this similar idea has translated elegantly to Magic is just that colorless cards, artifacts, can kind of do anything. They don't really have color pie restrictions. It's just that it always costs a lot more mana, right? That's the same way that they get that sort of idea into Magic's rule system. And I agree that the way that Twobrid just sort of sits on the card, sits in the rules, is kind of clunky at best. I want to talk about Frontline Rush.
Yeah, let's do it.
I am so into this card. This is quite unpopular on our Cube survey, only being tested by 6.9% of respondents with a rating of 6.3. But it's a card I'm really excited about for Sacred Geometry. I think you should be excited about for the regular Cube, Anthony, if you're not already. It is red-white for an instant. Choose 1, create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, or target creature gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. Raise the alarm, plus a cool little combat trick in the spirit of like Appeal to Authority, or what's the more iconic version of that? I know this because of
Might of the
100
Masses, but
Ornithopters.
that's green.
Yeah, they tend to be green typically. There's an instant speed one. Strength in Numbers is what I'm thinking of as sort of the most iconic version of this effect. I think this card is so sick. I think the art is awesome. You got these like goblins sort of wrapped in this electrical energy, and these sort of modes are very complementary. They speak to each other in a way where it's like you either want to go wide or you want to go tall. You probably are not doing both in the same game or the same matchup or the same deck, and the fact that this plays both roles is really fascinating.
Yeah, I guess both modes do kind of go wide. One asks you to have already gone wide to get the big pump, but I see what you mean. The art is sick. It's pretty clean and evergreen in that way. But yeah, it's neat. It's kind of like a Goblin Surprise also. Yeah.
Yeah, can you imagine just curving this into Goblin Surprise, into Heroic Reinforcements?
With double vision out?
That's some regular Cube
With
nonsense
double
there.
vision out? Yeah, I think a card is just so sick. It's kind of perfect for me. And in the regular Cube, it has heroic implications, which is the mechanic in red white, and it also has go wide token implications, which is also a sort of sub theme you have
For
going
sure.
on there. So
The challenge is there's just a bunch of Boros cards that I like for that cube.
all right, name any that are as cool as this card.
All of them.
Wrong.
Swift Blade, what is it called?
Swiftblade Vindicator.
Swiftblade
That was
Vindicator.
actually maybe the only one that's actually closest to being cool.
Heroic Reinforcements.
I think this is way more interesting and cooler. You actually play heroic reinforcements in the regular cube?
Yeah, I think so. Who can say?
I think would be really strong there. Are you sure
It
you
is.
do?
You think I don't know my own cube?
Frankly, yes. You have Annex and Cymede.
Absolutely.
I think Frontline Rush is better than Annex and Cymede. Better in terms of like more cool, more interesting, more iconic.
We got Baird. Honestly, I could maybe cut Baird, the 2-mana Baird, and Heroic Reinforcement. Okay, so there's only 4 currently, so maybe we just go up to 5. Make the cube bigger.
The Boros sections of the regular cube and the Sacred Geometry cube are almost identical, and I'm so excited about this for that cube in particular.
Hey, it's Evan, medium-time listener, first-time caller, and my hot take for Tarkir Dragonstorm is that Ugin, Eye of the Storms, is a completely atrocious and unappealing cube card. It might be the flashiest of the set, but I can tell you that if I see this in a cube list, I am not excited to play the cube. That is because it is a fundamentally boring design. It is a fundamentally unfun play pattern, not even from a toxic standpoint, which we can get to into a moment, but it's really just not a card that really does much of anything outside of its one thing. And that is, it's a Spine of Ishtar that's incredibly hard to interact with, and then otherwise, you're just stabilizing the board or maybe double spelling a little bit faster. It is the blandest card object that I can imagine, and it is also promoting very bad play patterns, and it's just plain boring to look at and evaluate. It sparks no joy.
Who else has an honorable mention before we get to the top 9?
I have a maybe dishonorable mention, Skirmish Rhino. This is white, black, and green for a 3/4 creature Rhino that has trample, and when it enters, each opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. This is the highest rated card in the set, and unfortunately, like, the results are like somewhat significant, and so it's not just a statistic blip.
No, hold on. It absolutely is. Did you not see that Trainmaster GT clearly submitted multiple surveys where he just submitted this card and rated it a 10?
Dear God.
I didn't know what we were going to do about that.
Duplicates get filtered out anyway in the survey.
They should, yeah.
No, he just didn't list the same cube every time. Or the same
tricky.
name. He lied. I mean, I am 99% sure that's what happened.
It's taken years, but we've finally been griefed.
There was a day
surveys.
where if you watch the channel, there was like, I don't know, 5 or 10 or 15 in a row that were just back to back within a minute of each other. Just Skirmish Rhino, just rating it a 10.
Well, Trainmaster GT, you're banned. Abusive survey.
Yeah, I don't know what we're going to do about that. I kind of want to fix the data and scold Trainmaster GT. Take his little model trains from him and snap him over my knee.
Okay, let's not go crazy.
Oh, you like this, caboose? Snap!
Oh boy. All right. Well, maybe we shouldn't just flame one user on air.
I mean, I'll double check and make sure that Trainmaster GT was in fact the person that did this, because somebody griefed us.
It would be a cool.
If it was somebody that wasn't Trainmaster GT, I'd be shocked.
Framing Trainmaster GT, that would be a great way to frame him.
Well, everybody, let me just say that after I threatened to take Trainmaster GT's model trains and snap them over my knee, I did do a little digging and in fact found out it was not Trainmaster GT that griefed the survey, but instead it was Joe Anderson, host of Joe's Week in Magic, creator of Cali Cube Champs, Cube Community Raconteur, and now Survey Ruiner, Joe Anderson. So my sincerest apologies to Trainmaster GT. And Joe, you're on notice. Anyway, now we can say what I actually think about Skirmish Rhino after faking like 7 different opinions for the episode of Cube Engineers where we helped Trainmaster GT in what is one of the most elaborate and hard to follow pranks I've ever been a part of in my entire life. I think this card is stupid. A hat on a hat. It's like, oh yeah, the card everyone loves and you make it a little smaller. Boo, dumb. Be more interesting.
Yeah. I mean, nostalgia is one thing, right? I am nostalgic about Tarkir. I like the set. And part of the reason I like it is that I was playing it when I was younger and playing it with people that I love that I don't get to see as often as I do now. Whatever. But I don't know. My nostalgia functions like more as revisits more than remakes or reboots, right? Skirmish Rhino is a reboot of a card. And what I'm looking for is something that's less of a direct call out and more of, I don't know, just I like the set and I would want to spend more time on there. I don't need to see the same things that I used to love. I want to see new things that I can grow to love. So I don't know. I disagree philosophically with the like kind of meme and remake impulse behind this card. And yeah, I don't know, somewhat relieved that the rank is fabricated.
Yeah, that number is fake news.
All right.
Anthony, I know you've got a lot of cards you love from this set. You've been poring over it for all your cube lists. What are some of your honorable mentions that are not in the top 9?
Oh, I think we covered them all.
Oh, great. Cool. I have one more that I want to talk about, which is Kishla Skimmer. This is green and blue for a 2/2 flying creature bird scout. It has the ability, whenever a card leaves your graveyard during your turn, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. This is actually fairly high on our survey. It's the 11th most popular card, with 16.3% of our respondents testing it at a rating of 6.2. It's quite high, and I think it is underrated. I think this card is very cool. It is like flexible in the things that it cares about. You know, you can trigger this with Delve, you can trigger this with Scavenging Ooze, you can trigger this with Unearth, you can trigger this obviously with Harmonize, is what it's designed for in the set. There are a lot of ways in Modern Magic where cards leave your graveyard. You can trigger this with your Emery, with your Luris, with whatever you like to do, your Reanimate. There's so many ways that this card can possibly be triggered, and the sort of baseline of a 2/2 flyer for 2 is very reasonable. that I think this card is going to be more powerful than people think, more fun to play with than people think, and just create weird space in cubes for cards to combine in ways that people are not used to, in a way that is very fun and novel. So I think Kishla Skimmer is very cool, and I think people are probably going to like it even more as time goes on.
It reminds me of the crime mechanic from Thunder Junction. Like, previously, Magic hadn't really cared about the act of targeting or what you target.
Sure, yeah.
And so just adding a couple of crime cards to a cube suddenly recontextualizes, oh, all my Doomblades now have this extra, effect on them. And in the same way, Kishla Skimmer kind of plays in that space. Very cool.
Yeah, and I think, like crimes, people are going to be surprised at how often this triggers. It's just going to trigger way more than you think. And it doesn't have the sort of baggage of the named mechanic crime. I think was a little bit rough because some things feel like they should absolutely be crimes and they weren't. Like, I destroyed every creature in play, and that was fine by the letter of the law. Nobody was mad. Not a crime. I, targeted my opponent to make them draw a card. Crime. You did a crime now. So I think the sort of attempt to flavor that mechanic maybe was one of the weakest parts of it, whereas this doesn't have any of that baggage. It's got a simple ability. It's just on one card. No flavor to that ability, but I think it's going to be quite good.
What is up, Lucky Paper Radio? It is at Amechi from the Cube Talk Discord and creator of F360, which narrowly slid into being selected for Boston Cube Party. So let's go for that. My hot take for Tarkir Dragonstorm is that the quiet, uncommon Kishla Skimmer is the card that you have been looking for if you are a slightly below max power level legacy type person. It's no Uro, it's no Oko, thank God, but it is exactly the sort of flexible, interesting, gluey sort of piece that multicolor should have. It doesn't demand a specific archetype, but it does promote delve, flashback, reanimation, all sorts of different things. And I think that as people play the set more, they're going to see that that card actually stands out as something cool to consider. God, I hope that we get more designs like that in the future in the few remaining real Magic sets we get a year. Let's go Tarkir.
Okay, I will actually make one honorable mention, which is there's a cycle of monocolored utility lands, which are kind of interesting. Curious what you guys think. So, for example, there's Dalkovan Encampment. This is a land that produces white mana, but it also enters tapped unless you control a swamp or a mountain. But it has the ability 3, so 2 and a white, tap it. Whenever you attack this turn, create 2 1/1 red warrior creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. So there's one in each color that enters untapped if you have the two sort of other faction lands, and then a pretty efficient ability stapled to each one. I feel like I'm always really drawn to monocolored utility lands, but end up just having a difficult time finding space for them in cubes. The rider of them entering tapped unless you care about certain other lands that there's no visual indicator of, I think is kind of a big downside on these for me, though.
I also stand at utility land. I love them so much. I play so many in my cubes, and therefore it is hard to find space for more. I agree. The fact that these care about a specific faction makes total sense in this set, obviously. Very resonant here. In a cube, it's going to be a little odd that this only cares about, like you said, 2 other colors, and it's not indicated visually. And in many cases, I don't think in isolation is going to be indicated flavorfully either. Like, it's not going to make sense that the Mobilize ability feels very white. So it's like, I have to be either doing red or black things. Like, why not green? Like, that has a lot of tokens in green. Why can't I have green and have that come into play untapped? Like, I think it's going to feel a little odd. So that's my feeling about them too.
I really like that these utility lands speak to a multicolor deck without actually helping you hit a multicolor deck. Like, if I play Dalkovan Encampment, I want to have swamps and mountains in my deck, maybe to maximize this, but that puts me into a second or third color, and Dalkovan Encampment is mono white, and so it doesn't help me cast my black or red spells. And so there's inherently kind of a backstop in the way this is designed to prevent a 5-color soup. It's not like you could play all 5 of these in one deck. That would be crazy. Kind of cool incentives there. It's also just like you could play this tapped. I mean, Treetop Village comes in tapped and is perfectly strong, right? It's not really a function of can I make mana off of this on turn one. Another one would be like Raging Ravine or Den of the Bugbear. These often come into play tapped. And so, it's not the end of the world if you have to play this for its kind of face value in a just mono white deck or a white green deck. So it's more like unlocking an extra bonus if it happens to come in untapped. Very cool lands. I think they've got a lot of character.
All right, we got to get on to these top 9 cards. This is why I broke it up into 2 episodes all these years ago, because editing the super long episodes is like such a drag. But everyone was like, no, we don't want multiple set review episodes, so let's do one again. And here we are again, making another super long episode. So I am lodging a formal complaint against all the listenership and
just cut it in
my
half right
co-hosts. I don't know. I might. We'll see. We'll see how long we talk about these top 9 cards. So we're going to cover the top 9 here because there was just kind of a nice, reasonable gap in popularity between the 9th and 10th most popular card. But we haven't said it yet. There's an article with all of this data for you to then dive into yourself, and you should absolutely check it out. Parker's written a beautiful piece to sort of pair with it, and also you can dig into the sort of long tail of all the results and find the cards that make the most sense for your cube, not for the cube in general, the abstract sort of royal cube as we are talking about here. I'll take number 9. It is Rotcurse Rakshasa. This is 1 and a black for a creature demon. It is a 5/5. So already, okay. 2 mana 5/5. It's got trample.
Seems pretty good.
Whoa, it's getting better. It also has Decayed. So this creature cannot block when it attacks, sacrifice it at the end of combat. So it's a 2 mana 5/5 with trample you get to hit once with. Then it has a ability called Renew. Play X black, exile this card from your graveyard, put a Decayed counter on each of X target creatures, activate only as a sorcery. This is being tested by 20% of our respondents, but with a pretty tepid rating of 5.5. And I think that is somewhat predictable because this card is pretty novel. There is really nothing I can think of that we can compare this to. You get one hit with a big creature, then you get this ability from the graveyard. How strong is that? I don't know, but I suspect quite strong.
This card is bizarre to me. I mean, it just reads so much like a Modern Horizons card in that, Decayed is not a mechanic I thought would come back outside of a set like Modern Horizons where they do a lot of that remixing of keyword mechanics. It's the first time we're seeing Decayed on a non-token. It was specifically only on these 2/2 zombies, and then mashing up Decayed not only on this card, but now you give your opponent's card Decayed. It's like, I don't know that that's a bad thing, but it surprised me.
I was shocked. I thought this was in the Commander set, because sometimes you see that in Commander sets too, where they will bring in a couple other mechanics, have a little more leeway with individual card complexity. And I realized this is in the main set, and I was like, that does feel weird. It has big Modern Horizons energy.
But I think the card is kind of cool. I've actually had a chance to play with this, and it just feels like a great kind of aggro card that gives you some interesting decisions. You get one chance to deal, Lava Axe your opponent, and then I think the really critical piece of this is giving your opponent's creatures Decayed. Both means they can only attack once, so it could read as kind of a defensive thing, but it also means they can't block. The way that I ended up playing with this was just, you can't block this turn after I've hit you with my big creature one time, now I'm going to hit you with all my small guys and get you dead. I think it's also funny, it gives everything Decayed. It's critical that it also has Decayed itself such that they can find somewhere to put reminder text on this. So yeah, interesting kind of package, and I think that for people that are looking for black aggressive decks in their cube, this is a much more novel tool than just another 1 mana 2/1 that comes back from the graveyard if you meet some requirement.
Yeah, I think it's got a lot of swag. It's cool that it leans into that power at any price, philosophy that black has. And then, yeah, it's got some interesting play to it as well. I will mention that this is the top-rated card with the Sultai mechanic from this set, Renew. Renew is another weird one where the output can be anything and the input can be anything too. So it doesn't have to be X black exile. It's another workhorse mechanic that is intended to give the Sultai a little bit of identity in this set, but is extremely vanilla. And I don't really think it qualifies as a quote unquote new mechanic in the sense that Omen would, or some of these others that we'll discuss.
Just to be clear, you are always exiling the card from your graveyard as part of the renew cost. So it's really just flashback, but on creatures.
Yeah, there are 2 different flashback mechanics in this set. It's kind of weird.
Right, because it's only on creatures. Yeah, only on creatures, and it basically just gives creatures a spell-esque ability from the graveyard as a flashback effect, which I agree, Parker, like does feel very... Well, first of all, again, I think the resonance of like, what are you renewing? You're exiling this thing forever. It's never coming back. And like, you're not really renewing anything. I think the name is kind of asynchronous with the...
You're actually decaying things in this case?
Yeah, that's kind of what it feels like. And it also is like very generic in a sort of a Harmonize way. So very similar, honestly.
Kind of bland, yeah.
Anyway, I think his card is really sick. I think it's powerful. I think it's interesting. I think it actually is a nice sort of kind of elegant package. I mean, Decayed is a weird mechanic, but like you said, Anthony, the fact that this both has Decayed and grants Decayed makes the card all about it. And so the fact that it's all about that thing means that that one thing can require a little bit of mental load, and it's fine because that's what the card is about.
It also like tells the story of how the card works. Oh, it's got a Rotcurse. Okay, so it falls apart, like its body can't contain the spiritual energy within it or whatever.
Please, my body, it can't contain the spiritual energy within me.
Yeah, exactly. And then that energy like infects other people because demons curse people. That's what they do. And so, yes, you do then have to put that into game mechanics and like order of operations with attacks and like triggers and things. But as a unit, like it has a meaning to it. It has like semantics, these sets of mechanics together. And so it makes sense to me, I think. Anthony, I think you have to take this next one.
All right, next up we have Sunpearl Kirin. This is 1 and a white for a 2/1 creature Kirin. It has flash, it has flying. When it enters, return up to one other target non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. If it was a token, draw a card. We got White Mane Lion with flying. Neat.
Just trying to get Anthony to say something nice about a card, but you picked a card he has probably nothing nice to say about because it's not his beloved White Mane Lion.
Yeah, we already have White Mane Lion. We don't need anything else.
He's so disinterested in any variations on it, and he's like, "Oh, no, it's not a forced thing, so you don't have to get punished completely if your opponent has a removal spell. It's not the merger going no one love. Boop boop boop."
Yeah, thank you for all that.
This card is also being tested by 20% of our respondents. It has a higher rating of 6.0, and this, I think, speaks to, frankly, I don't think this card is more exciting to people than Rotcurse Rakshasa. I think it is more known quantity to people than Rotcurse Rakshasa. If you were on White Mane Lion, and unlike Anthony, you found the play pattern of your opponent removing your only other creature in response to you casting White Mane Lion, so you put White Mane Lion back in your hand. If you found that not fun...
If you think that's cool, actually... Keep playing White Mane Lion.
If you think that's cool, you'll keep doing that. But if you don't, then maybe you see Sunpearl Kirin and you see this is actually a tweak on this kind of effect that has implications that you prefer for play patterns.
Did anyone go and check that Ian Braverman didn't submit 30 surveys with this card? I feel like I'm paranoid now.
I think the art is really striking on this card. This might be my favorite part of it. We've just got a regal like beast here, but... Also, in the background, is that the Weatherlight?
It looks... That was my first thought as well, but I don't think so.
It shouldn't be.
Why would the
Weatherlight's not on Tarkir, right?
Then again, why are there lotuses in the Rotcursed Why are there lotuses in the Rotcursed Rakshasa?
I mean, flowers can grow anywhere, right?
That's what they say.
I think I'm going to go to bat for this card being interesting, even though Anthony's going to be a little salty sailor. I've always been not a fan of the downside on White Mane Lion, and I don't think it is necessary for the card to be balanced. So I like that this is only returning up to one other target non-land permanent instead of forcing you to return something. I think it's interesting this can return non-creatures, which is why I've always liked Core Skyfisher over White Mane Lion, because it's really interesting to pick up your Abundant Growth, your Ichor Wellspring, your whatever. You can always find things to do with that. I also think the ability to just turn any token into a clue, just get rid of it if it's going to die otherwise. If they, blocked it, you want to swing all out, sacrificing a couple of your attackers because you wanted to get damage through with the unblocked ones. Now you can also turn one of the block creatures into drawing another card. I think it gives you a reason to consider this in a deck that also plays tokens where you otherwise don't ever want this kind of effect because you never want to bounce a token because it's just bad for you. I think it's just an interesting sort of balance of this kind of effect, and I can see why people are into it because I think it's cool and dynamic and will lead to fun games and fun play patterns.
It is still a pretty low rating, though. 6 is higher than 5, but it's not that high still. So it's interesting to see. I guess actually a lot of these top cards didn't get super confident ratings.
Yeah, a broader pattern that we'll see is that even though, in terms of the number of respondents, Dragonstorm is immensely popular compared to other sets recent standard legal sets, we're still not seeing that our audience is like converging on a single or more than one like clear front runner in terms of popularity. So a lot of people are submitting surveys and seem to be excited about some cards from the set. They just don't agree on what those cards are. And that really speaks to the breadth and diversity within the cube world, I think.
For sure.
All right. So from the Kirin, we'll move on to number 7, which is Surrak, Elusive Hunter. This is 2 and a green for a 4/3 legend human warrior. Surrak can't be countered, has trample, and whenever a creature you control or a creature spell you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you draw a card. This is tested by 21.6% of our respondents at time of recording with an average rank of 5.7. So we've got a 4/3 trample with a little bit of specifically anti-mess with my stuff, which I really love. Like, it's cool that this is a 4/3 that just like rumbles on its own. And then it also says, hey, you aren't allowed to play a game plan that doesn't commit to the board. You've either got to draw me a card and give me a fighting chance in this game, or you got to play a 3/3 and we got to like sort this out in combat.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't say you can't do it, which is what I really like. I like these kinds of cards that don't completely forego some possibility for your opponent, but rather completely change the incentives and the payoffs in a way that will disincentivize that thing from your opponent, which is a way to essentially introduce, hate against a certain style of deck while not having it be completely polarizing, because your opponent can't always has something to do with just whether that thing is good or bad for them has changed based on the card you have in play. Mechanically, I think this card is basically perfect. I'm not sure it needed the can't be countered text. I could take or leave that. It will be a little extra punishing to decks that are really heavy on counter magic and lighter on removal. If your plan is to counter your opponent's creatures and not remove them, this will be extra punishing because it will resolve and you have nothing to say about it. So that part I could take or leave, but otherwise mechanically I think this is a card that I've basically wanted for a long time. I've always said I want Gnarlback Rhino, but that cares about your opponent's spells, or I want a sort of modern mid-rangey threat that essentially has a sort of protection from control and targeted removal, but doesn't do it in a like heavy-handed way. It doesn't just have like protection from black and blue. It doesn't just have like hexproof. And so this has given me exactly that. Aesthetically, I've always kind of had a little bit of a tiny qualm, and I'm getting really picky now, with biggish green creatures that are just humans. It's just like, I'm just a big guy. It's like, to me, like green is so much more evocative when you have like a bunch of beasts and animals and stuff.
I mean, he's a big guy and he's got antlers, so
that's just like
they're coming out of his chest.
Are those like spiritual antlers?
He's got 2 swords.
I
Maybe
get
this
it.
is
There
a
are
good time to
bears.
mention that in the old timeline, Surrak was the clan leader of the teamer. And then in the alternate timeline of Dragons of Tarkir, he was like the hunt master for the Atarka clan. So he also punched a bear. He is featured in the art for, I think, Savage Punch is the card. Anyways, he's a real brawler. He has what it takes.
Yeah, so anyway, flavorfully legendary creature human warrior, and also like the art is not my favorite, but mechanically it's a card that I've basically wanted for a long time, and I'm really excited to finally have.
Yeah, I think it's really cool as well.
Hello, friends. Birds here. Oh my god, I love this set so much. I've been drafting this one a ton. I think there's a ton of potential future cube staples for medium plus power environments in this set. Interestingly, the sort of dragon mechanics, the dragons are cool. The Omens are cool. They work. They do the thing. But the sort of dragon typal stuff in the exhales and the Dragonstorms, they're great in retail, but they're a little parasitic for cube unless you really want to commit to sort of that density of dragons. The rest of the mechanics, though, are wonderful, both as standalone cards and as packages, especially for me if what you're looking for in a good cube card is like interesting gameplay decisions and ways to avoid top decking and just spend your mana with it. It's card draw, card selection, mana sinks, graveyard recursion. Like Harmonize, it's just flashback, but with an interesting gameplay decision tacked onto it. Do you like tap down a potential attacker or defender to get this thing cheaper? Maybe you get a double spell, maybe you get to hold up some mana. Sunpearl Kirin, like it's just white main lion, but it's flying, it's optional, and if you pick up a token, you get to draw a card. interesting gameplay decision. I really love the red, white, go wide package. I think it's just like perfect drop in, ready to go for medium power cube environments, especially because there's only 2 unique tokens you have to worry about for the endure and mobilize mechanics. The standout for me here is Descendant of Storms. This is the white 1-drop 2/1. Whenever this creature attacks, you may pay 1 and white. If you do, it endures 1. So if you get an aggressive start with this, you've got a turn 2 play, and just this interesting choice. Do I put a counter on it, get in for more damage, start building this thing up? Do I start pooping out 1/1s while I still have the chance? Interesting gameplay decision. The Surrak in this set, Surrak Elusive Hunter. Okay, so like on one hand, it's a 3 mana, 4/3 with trample, can't be countered, dies to Doomblade, dies to Lightning Bolt. On the other hand, you get to draw a card every time your opponent targets any of your creatures or counters any of your creature spells. I've played against this card a bunch, and it's just really interesting. Like, do I wait and try and kill this thing in combat and let it sort of blank my interaction until then? Do I just eat the cost, point a removal spell at them, give them their free card? What if they've got something scarier on their side and I've only got 1 removal spell? Do I kill the big thing, give them a free card, possibly 2 cards? On both sides of the table, there's just very interesting gameplay choices to make, and there's a ton of that in this set. So I think this one's an all-timer. Retail draft, super interesting, super deep, very inspiring as a cube designer. Friends, go have fun with this great set. I love you all. Goodbye.
All right. Our number 6 most popular card for most cubes from Tarkir Dragonstorm is Desperate Measures. 1 black mana for an instant. Target creature gets +1/-1 until end of turn. When it dies under your control this turn, draw 2 cards. This card should just be called Skullclamp.
Skullclamp, one
verb.
time.
This is an interesting little removal spell that lets you kill a 1 toughness creature of your opponent's for 1 mana, which is fine. Or if you have your own 1 toughness creature, you can just cash it in for 2 cards. Or, I think best case scenario, let's say you go to combat and attack with your 2/2 and your opponent blocks with their 3/3. Now you can turn your 2/2 into a 3/1, and it will still then trade with your opponent's creature, and you still get to draw 2 cards. And now you've 3 for 1 to your opponent for 1 mana.
Well, 3 for 2. 2 for 3'd? 3 for 2'd. Because you lose your creature, and you lose this card, but you get 2 more cards, and you get their
Sure,
creature.
That's true. You do lose your creature, I suppose. I think this card is really interesting. I actually, as sitting here today, don't know how to rate it. Our respondents rated it a 5.9 amongst the 21.6% of respondents that are going to be testing this card. Just from a pure power level perspective, Anthony and Parker, what do you think of this effect? How good is this card?
I mean, it's going to vary wildly depending on the context. I think in a cube like regular cube, where it's all about creature combat and small creatures and card advantage is hard to come by, this would be extremely strong, and you would most often be just like, yeah, hopefully, I don't think it would be that hard to set up a combat where you're both trading up and getting a bunch of card advantage, so...
Do you play Village Rites in the...
Yeah, and it reminds me a lot of something like Village Rites, which is, it's a powerful card, so... In a lot of other cubes where, you're just comboing off and doing big stuff, this is just not going to be a card at all, so it's going to depend.
Well, I don't necessarily agree. I think Village Rites is a card in those cubes very often, because you are drawing a bunch of cards, and a lot of those combo engines have to do with a bunch of little tokens or something, so I think it's entirely possible that this card could be very viable in a cube like that as well.
And this just is Village Rites if it targets a 1-mana creature you control, right?
But 1 toughness,
also
yes.
Does the Village Rites thing of like they go to kill your big angel and you turn that into card advantage for you.
That's true, yeah.
Yes, so it still does the Village Rites thing in the sort of response to removal, no matter how big your creature is, because if they're going to remove it anyway, now you can just draw 2 cards.
Unless they're going to exile it.
That's true.
Oh,
Unless they're going to exile it.
Magic is complicated.
Or bounce it, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely got a lot of play to it, and I wonder if that by itself is enough to recommend this. Like, it does have all these edge cases and all these like different ways that you can use it. I can imagine holding it in my hand, having drafted it, intending to do the Skullclamp thing, and then emergently discovering all these other use cases.
Sometimes
to it as I play my games.
Going to be desperate. You just need to kill that seasoned Hallowblade somehow, and this will do that.
For sure. And like, I don't know, I think that's really cool to like draft a card for one reason and then realize 4 other reasons it synergizes with the rest of your deck.
Very sick art too. Very sick art.
Yeah, very cool.
I'll also say if you are playing a more power-motivated cube, I have not been thinking much about the Button Magic Cube lately. It has not been at the forefront of my mind. But as I sit here right now sort of processing this, it's important in those cubes often, if you are playing some of the best 1-drops in Magic, to have enough 1-mana answers to important creatures. I'm thinking of things like Mother of Runes, like Ragavan, like cards that are very good, but also just have 1 toughness, but are so much better if you get to untap with them. And so a card like Desperate Measures, while it's on its face very small ball removal, it only can kill the smallest things, basically. Some of those smallest things, if your cube is power motivated, are going to be huge problems and must be killed. And so this might pull its weight there as, even just a target creature gets -1 toughness with upside of all these other use cases we're talking about.
And that's so cool to spend your card advantage spell as instead a removal spell. Oh, I think you might have just talked me into it.
Anthony, tell us about Tersa Lightshatter.
Tersa Lightshatter. You know what's crazy is I've also played with this card already. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 3/3 legendary creature Orc Wizard. It has haste, and whenever it enters, discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. When it attacks, if there are 7 more cards in your graveyard, so if you have Threshold, exile a card at random from your graveyard, and you may play it this turn. So this is going to attack fast, loot a bunch, and then if you get to Threshold, start casting random spells from your graveyard. It's being tested by 22% of the people that responded to the survey, so similar to the previous cards, with, again, a pretty middling rating of only 6.2.
Just to be pedantic, it's going to rummage a bunch, which is different.
Yes.
You won't always want to rummage.
This is the episode
you will
where
always
we should
want to
be
loot.
pedantic. But you're very motivated to in this case because you do want to get to those 7 cards in your graveyard.
And I imagine most of the 22.4% of people playing this are doing it as a enabler for madness, enabler for discarding, reanimation threats. So looking for a discard outlet that also does other stuff, and this certainly does a lot of other stuff.
I find it to be a little bit safe as a design and not, I guess it's well balanced or whatever, and that's true. But also it creates this experience where the player's like, oh, when is this ever bad for me? I get an ETB that filters my hand in case the rest of my hand doesn't look good. And it gets to attack right now. And so if my opponent's tapped out, then I get an attack trigger or whatever. And it's like, I don't know. I find it to be all upside, and that's a little bit boring to me when the card is this wordy.
Welcome to 2025 Magic design, Parker.
Yeah.
When is Surrak, Elusive Hunter bad for you? These things are never bad for you. They're just good threats, That's what we get these days.
Right.
We had Decayed. We had a big guy with Decayed. That was kind of a downside.
That one was cool. We love that one.
And I don't know. I like this less than I like Surrak because your opponent gets to choose how many cards does Surrak draw for you. And if they choose to let you not draw any cards, then that means they're playing creature combat, and that's what I want my players to be doing. Whereas this one is just a little bit agnostic of the rest of your deck, I suppose. That's maybe my main criticism.
I think in a powerful cube, if you are not doing madness things or graveyard things, this card is going to be pretty underwhelming. So I think it is actually kind of a synergistic card in that sense. Now, obviously, if you just put this in the regular cube or whatever, like a 3/3,
it just has enough stats that
it has enough stats that if your cube is low enough power, that it will just do enough on its own. But that's kind of true for any synergy card that you drop into, or a lot of synergy cards at least, if you drop into a low enough power environment. So I don't know. I mean, I agree. I'm not in love with this card. It's got a lot of text. I don't love copying things at random or playing things at random from your graveyard, rather. So I'm not in love with it, but it doesn't seem to be the greatest offender of no downside threats we get in 2025, of which there are so many now.
Yeah.
I'm feeling conflicted because on one hand, I want to say, I like this card because it sort of tells a story and the mechanics, fit together in a way that makes sense and tell you how this card wants to be played. On the other hand, I'm like, oh, this is just another self-solving puzzle. And it's both of those things are kind of true.
I think it is a little bit evocative, you play this card and a lot of stuff is going to happen. Cards are going all over the place.
And it's got lightning bolts in the art to let you know that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the art is very energetic. It's very kind of chaotic. And so I think it does kind of have a bit of resonance in that regard. But like I said, not in love with it. It's whatever.
Our number 4 card is Sinkhole Surveyor. This is 1 and a black for a 1/3 creature bird scout. It has flying, and whenever this creature attacks, you lose 1 life, and this creature endures 1. So to endure, you put X 1/1 counters where that's the number, or you create a 1/1 white spirit creature token. So if you endure 2, you either put 2 counters or you create a 2/2 white spirit creature token, and so on. This is tested by 24.9% of our respondents with an average rank of 6.3. This is also, while we're here, the no, it's not the highest rated Endure card. Will a little bit of foreshadowing, but this is the Abzan mechanic. It's meant to, again, provide flavor to the set and show that the Abzan are resilient and so on. The main reason I think Endure will play weirdly in Cube is that it creates a 1/1 white spirit creature that does not have flying. Boo. And most of the time...
Is it always a 1/1? Or if you have Endure 2, it's going to make 2/2s, right?
It does make bigger ones, depending on
right, that's the other thing.
Is, yeah.
But like non-flying white spirits is perhaps the first of its kind and very uncommon for me in my Cube experience. And so I feel like that'll just be misplayed a lot.
It is confusing to have white spirits that don't have flying. I think that the best way to avoid that is to take this technique from Judge Rob, which is just call them ground ghosts, and then your opponent will know.
That's what Magic should have done. That's what Wizards of the Coast should have done. They should have called them ground ghosts. That would make it so much more clear. I think this card is very powerful. I think this mechanic has a couple of examples of powerful cards. We're going to cover one more in the top 3 cards here for sure. I agree, Parker. My biggest complaint is just that Spirit Tokens, I think Spirit Tokens should fly. I don't know, like... I get that not all... I mean, spirits do fly. I'm tired of people saying that not all spirits fly. They always float above the ground. I guess the implication is that some spirits, they aren't able to just go up in the atmosphere arbitrarily. They're floating, but they're still ground-bound.
Ground-bound.
But that doesn't work for me. I think it's confusing. And I agree, Parker,
I think people are going to grab the wrong token out of the box, and then 3 turns later, you'll be like, oh... this is actually not flying, but our life totals have both changed as a result, and like it's just going to be bad.
I mean, in this case, people are just going to put the counter on the bird, right? So it's not a problem.
What? Maybe.
Oh, you're saying they're just going to do that instead of making the token? I don't think so.
I think on most cards you want the token most of the time, but this one having flying, I think, is going to be an exception.
I don't agree.
Okay.
Well, it does let you improve the clock, right? Because
I almost just said because the token has flying too, but it doesn't. It literally doesn't.
The ground ghost does not have flying.
No. Yeah, I think that the fact that the words 1/1 white spirit creature token, those are so often followed with flying.
Would it be more clear if they said without flying? I think it would not, because people would just see flying.
I don't know what they could do to make it more clear. It's really rough.
They could make it not a white spirit.
Well, yeah, obviously.
So it's a little bit troubled from a usability standpoint, but I think the power is there.
Yeah, this is a kind of a 2-mana Rabble Master. Doesn't have haste, obviously, but...
Or like Ledger Shredder-esque, comes down, blocks well, and continues to grow and threaten.
My biggest criticism here is that we have 2 or multiple different graveyard mechanics, and yet the mechanic they chose to name Endure is just make a guy? Well, how is that enduring? That doesn't make any sense to me.
I also genuinely had to look it up. I forgot the name of the +1/+1 counter mechanic from the original set of Tarkir, and it was called Outlast. And Outlast and Endure are like synonyms.
I guess that's
mean exactly the same thing.
But really, this is more like Fabricate, except instead of getting lots of little guys, you get one specific guy.
That's my other thing, is that like this, again, it's meant to provide flavor for the Abzan, and so it's fine to reuse Fabricate and like tweak 2 different things about it, and now it's a new mechanic. But I don't know, it's not exactly carving out new space here.
Yeah, I guess the theme here is that these mechanics, for dint of them having to have filled very specific roles in this set, maybe are not the most broadly resonant outside of the context of this set specifically.
Yeah, exactly.
But still totally, fine. There's nothing about this that doesn't just play like a reasonable card in basically any environment that cares about creatures and combat.
Yeah, so if you like any of the cards with any of these mechanics for your cube, there is probably no reason why it doesn't slot into your cube reasonably well, save for all these aesthetic issues we're talking about, like using the adventure card frame on Omens and the fact that this is a 1/1 white spirit creature token that doesn't fly. Really just a bunch of near misses almost for me, I guess.
Yeah.
I would genuinely love the Omen mechanic if it was just one text box and it was written like an alternative casting cost. I would also like this mechanic a lot more if it made ground ghosts, colorless ground ghosts or whatever.
Sand tokens.
Sandy boys.
Sand soldiers.
All right, the third most popular card from Tarkir Dragonstorm is Voice of Victory. It is 1 white for a 1/3 creature human bard, and it has Mobilize 2. This is where we get the most popular Mobilize card from this set. Whenever this creature attacks, create 2 tapped and attacking 1/1 red warrior creature tokens, sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. It also has another ability: your opponents can't cast spells during your turn, which makes this a tidy little hate bear that also attacks very effectively. It will attack for 3 across 3 bodies every single time, kind of reminiscent of something like Carry Zev, in that this thing has high toughness and makes other creatures that can attack every turn then have to be sacrificed. It will also trigger all of your Sacrifice Matters stuff if your cube cares about that, and do it with 2 creatures every single turn, which I know is a reason that some people still really like Chandra Acolyte of Flame, because it makes the elemental tokens that have haste and can attack and then are both sacrificed rather than being exiled or whatever, which can really matter if you care about sacrifice synergies. It's being tested by 25.7% of our respondents with the, I think, actual highest rating in the set, various sort of griefing notwithstanding, of 7.2.
Yeah, it's cool. It's powerful. Mobilize, again, is one of these mechanics that's meant to hold up 10 designs, not 20. But for what it is, it plays exactly like it reads. It tells you what to do right on the card. It's nice that this has reminder text, and it's pretty straightforward.
And they didn't make the red warrior creature tokens have flying or whatever.
Shouldn't warriors have vigilance?
Making the mobilized tokens have vigilance, but still enter tapped and attacking and have to be sacrificed at the beginning of the next end step.
They really should have. This is obviously just very strong, like you said. It hits hard, and I think that this is rated so highly because this also is going to be really strong in environments that care about sacrificing stuff and like generating just a lot of material on the board that you can sacrifice to. It is at the end of... it's not even the next end step, so you can even skull clamp them because they stick around during the second main phase. And then if you have stuff like Blood Artist in play, this card is kind of just going to be nuts. So yeah, it makes sense to see it so highly up here and so highly rated.
Cool art too. I like the lighting. The lighting and composition is very dynamic. We love to see it.
Any art thoughts, Parker?
It reminds me of the Doof Warrior from Mad Max Fury Road, just a guitar guy leading the army. Maybe my brain's still back on Ether Drift, but I also just like that movie.
Parker's thoughts, great reminder text, and reminds him of a movie he enjoys.
Mad Max Fury Road is cool.
Can't say enough good about this card.
Witness me.
Our penultimate card from our survey results is Cori-Steel Cutter. This is 1 and a red for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and it has trample and haste. This is also the first card we're seeing with the mechanic Flurry, which says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, that's the Flurry part, create a 1/1 white monk creature token with prowess, and you may attach this equipment to it. It also has equip for 1 and a red. So at its baseline, this is kind of an expensive equipment that just grants +1/+1 trample and haste, which is not necessarily what you want to be doing for 2 mana, but cast 2 spells a turn, and this is going to be a very powerful hasty creature because it's just going to free equip every turn.
I don't think this is an expensive equipment at all. What's expensive about 2 mana equipment?
For 2 to equip for +1/+1 haste, just...
And trample.
If it didn't make its own creatures, right? It would be maybe a little underrated.
I don't know. I don't think...
Okay, let's focus on the making its own creatures. That's the important part.
It's a cheap card that also free equips. Like,
yes.
You pay 2 mana for this, and then it does its thing for the rest of the game. You don't have to touch it. I think this card is kind of cracked. I think it's really strong. We're a little bit, beyond pre-release season at this point, and it's already sort of making waves in some constructed formats. I'm also kind of obsessed with it. I think it rules. I think it's got awesome art. I love that it makes the same token that Monastery Mentor makes, so I can slot it into my cube without having to have another token going on. I think if anything, I'm worried this is going to be a little bit too good after board wipes, because no matter how many times your opponent wipes the board or removes everything, you just will untap and have a hasty attacker if you have a couple spells to cast, which I think is kind of cracked. But I'm always on the lookout for equipment that is powerful and interesting, specifically to pair with Stoneforge Mystic, because I do not run the Stoneforge Mystic cheat targets like Kaldra or Batterskull on my cube, but I love having a kind of toolboxy or sort of synergistic package of equipment that is still very much makes it worth drafting and playing Stoneforge Mystic, and I think this fits right into that sort of package while also just being great in any red-blue Spellslinger deck that is going to cast multiple spells and get to make a bunch of tokens and free equip and make them give them haste every single turn. I think it's sick.
Hey everyone, Cry-City here. My hot take is Cori-Steel Cutter. Now, it was originally a hot take, but now I'm seeing a lot of people talk about it this past week, so I figured I should probably get my thoughts down before it gets out of control. Cori-Steel Cutter is an equipment, so obviously it's really good for equipment decks, but it's also really good in Spellslinger when you want to double spell, and when you do, you make a body each time. This can be used as a sacrifice token. It works really well with Arcanist Dreadhorde, which has an interest in double spelling and pumping. It's great in aggro decks because it gives haste to things, and you often don't have to pay the equip cost, but if you do, it's pretty cheap. It's not a unique token. You might think it is, but you're probably already playing Monastery Mentor, and it helps be resilient against board wipes since you can double spell and start rebuilding from there. Overall, you might think the play pattern is very similar to Spellslinger, but along with double spelling, there's a lot of other options for this card. And lastly, if you're able to double spell consistently in control decks, you can use it as a chump blocker. Thanks.
I'll also speak up with praise of Flurry. So this is, again, the Jeskai faction mechanic. And though I've criticized the other 4 faction mechanics for being a little bit bland and a little bit like repetitive, Flurry is exploring new design space in a named way. I know we've had examples like...
we've had Clarion Spirit for quite a while.
Exactly. Clarion Spirit is the one I was failing to remember the name of. I know we've had these for a while, but now having a name that actually speaks to what the play experience is like. Oh, Flurry. I'm casting a flurry of spells. Like, that's just very obvious. It's also kind of monkish because, you know, like in Kung Fu movies or whatever, the trope is that monks are like, you know, strike quickly. You get it. But like, it also plays super well. I've spoken up, you know, in defense of Clarion Spirit many times for being an incentive to think about how you structure your turns and for rewarding good deck building with easily castable spells, a nice curve. So I think it'll play super, super well. And I also think that this is the kind of mechanic that could anchor 30 designs, maybe not in one set, but there's a lot of design space for whenever you cast your second spell, get a reward. And add that to how well it plays, and I'm super enthusiastic.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even mention the other sequence that I think is going to come up a lot and maybe be pretty obvious is you just cast this on turn 3 and then cast a cantrip, and then this is kind of just a hasty creature on its own, just a 2-mana 2/2 haste that then does a lot the next turn.
And that's so cool to be able to like, oh, do I want to spend all my mana on turn 2 or do I want to get a haste thing on turn 3 for sure?
I mean, you just want to do it on turn 2 and then follow with Mishra's Bauble, obviously.
Well, good point. And
what's better than a 1-mana cantrip?
A 0-mana cantrip.
A 0-mana cantrip.
Clearly. Yeah, this is really fun, I think.
I was ecstatic when I heard that they were codifying and naming the second spell in a turn mechanic. I think it's such a beautiful piece of technology that is maybe the perfect contrast to Kicker. So, like, you have this dichotomy where you can play a couple spells in a turn that are less powerful to give your thing double strike or whatever. Or you could cast individually more powerful cards. It's the perfect tempo versus value question, right? That being said, I think they did not print a bunch of the bread and butter effects that I was looking for, like Flurry, Scry 2, or Flurry, this thing gets flying, and when it hits, you draw a card or whatever. I think that they made the individual cards a lot more complicated than they need to be when they could have just really explored this cool space that they invented.
All right, now we've said all the good things about the card. I'm going to bring up the most detailed quibble imaginable.
Oh, do we have to talk about the lighting in this one too?
I don't hate the lighting. What's wrong with the lighting?
No.
No, what I do want to talk about is, what is the shape of this blade? I'm prepared to have egg on my face here if this is like a reference to a historical blade shape that actually has some purpose, but it seems completely nonsensical to me. What is the sort of like barb on the back doing other than making this impossible to ever put in any kind of sheath?
That's the Achilles tendon remover?
I guess. Ooh. I mean, I've definitely seen blades that have like a flat spine and then a thing cut out in them that gives you a way to like have a hook. But the fact that this hook sticks up out of the spine of the blade strikes me as like some fantasy blade nonsense that doesn't make any actual sense.
Cut ropes?
You can cut ropes with the sharp side of the blade.
Both sides are sharp.
Like I said, prepared to have egg on my face that this is actually like a very useful blade shape I've just never seen before. But when I first saw this card, the sort of little scroll that is paired with it looked almost like it was supposed to be the sheath of the blade, and I was like, that wouldn't fit on there. It's got a big hook on the back.
Yeah, also you can fit it in a sheath. The sheath just has some negative space.
Yeah, it has to be huge, like some sort of huge sheath. I don't know.
You just don't put in a sheath. You're just fighting nonstop. You got haste. You got trample.
Speaking of fighting nonstop, our number one card from Tarkir Dragonstorm, is Descendant of Storms. This is a single white mana for a creature 2/1 human soldier. Whenever this creature attacks, you may pay 1 and a white. If you do, it endures 1. Again, that's put a 1/1 counter on it or create a 1/1 ground ghost. It is tested by 38% of our testers. So this is by far the most popular card of the set. It's the only one that approaches any sort of wide-reaching popularity, and it has an average rank of 6.7. So this is got all the hallmarks of a Lucky Paper Community Survey #1 hit. It's a 2/1 for 1 mana. That's just an enduringly popular, no pun intended, creature stat size. And it's obvious what it does well. It's meant to be an aggressive creature. People tend to get bored with their aggressive sections because it, quote unquote, is like a brain dead deck or like not very interesting. And so having a churn in your 1-drops makes it feel like it's got more synergy, even if your drafters tend to get bored with wide aggro. And then it's also just clearly powerful. It's a clear power upgrade on Elite Vanguard or like a vanilla creature, but then it has these dreams of like, oh, maybe I'll have some +1/+1 synergies. Maybe I'll have some token synergies. And my wide aggro deck can transform from a quote unquote boring deck, which by the way, I love wide aggro, so I don't feel that way personally, but it'll help me transform into a synergy deck that's cool or whatever. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little uncharitable with my characterization, but it's clearly deserving of the top spot.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this is almost in terms of power level, a strict upgrade on Usher the Fallen, which was another card that was just wildly popular when we did our survey. The fact that it is a known quantity and very cheap in terms of mana cost always means these kinds of cards are going to float to the top. And I do think that, it is interesting compared to Usher of the Fallen. You can sort of attack with impunity. If your opponent has a 1/1, they don't want to block it because you just get to pay the 2, get your counter, and that means you have the flexibility then to maybe make your token or just cast another spell.
Well, hold on. You have to do it when it attacks. So
you're right.
You don't get the impunity.
An attack trigger.
I was choose to do it before they decide to block.
Looking at Usher the Fallen and thinking about like, that you can do second main phase, which you can't do here, but you have to do this actually at the attack step. So that's
Are you
true.
looking at the results for Usher the Fallen? That was like 80% of our respondents, or 85% or something
crazy, and that was before we had griefers in our survey results.
I mean, it was when our reach was a little bit narrower, which I think just meant that we had more of a sort of trend to the types of cubes that were responding. But I also think this speaks to how much cube designers have realized, I hope at least in part due to our surveys, that
75% of the people who responded to the Kaldheim survey were testing Usher the Fallen. It also had a rating of 8.9.
Yeah, I mean, this one has 38% testers and rating 6.7 again, and I think that's still massively overrated. I think this card is not that interesting. I think it's actually going to play a lot like Usher the Fallen, which has stuck around in almost no cubes, because it turns out that what you want to do on turn 2 is play other cards from your hand and not activate the ability of this card. And this is an upgrade, I think, for the most part. I mean, you can't activate second main phase or whatever, so that is a little bit different than Boast. But the fact that you have the option of either making a token or growing it is something, but 2 mana for a token is a terrible rate. And 2 mana for a +1/+1 counter is also a terrible rate. So this is going to play like a Savannah Lions 99% of the time, I think, which is exactly what Usher the Fallen did, which is exactly why no one's playing it anymore.
Okay, I have no follow-up.
I thought Parker was going to give me a firm rebuke, but nothing but silence on the Zoom line.
I actually just agree with you. Like, we are seeing a drop-off in the popularity of these cards, and I do think that speaks to kind of like the maturation of the cube community, or at least maybe we're reaching more people who are less interested in chasing the power. Maybe that speaks to us adjusting to the 2020's pace of release and pace of like churning through new mechanics. And maybe it speaks to Cube itself as a format evolving into something that's more accepting of a wider range of goals. Whatever the case, I think it's maybe a positive trend, or at least that's my spin on it.
I think when we look back on this in our retrospective, Cori-Steel Cutter and Kishla Skimmer are going to be relatively underrated, and Descendant of Storms is going to be massively overrated. That's my called shot.
I think that's probably true. I mean, another factor is we've just gotten so many white 2/1s in recent years. There are now 22 if you want a Savannah Lions with extra text. You have so many options.
Yeah, and so you just kind of have to pick and choose which one suits your goals best. And
Oh, I guess maybe 21. One of these is a card that has toughness 1 on its front side and power 2 on its back side. So let's ignore that guy.
Hello, my name is Sean, or Jim Cricket 42, and this is my Tarkir Dragonstorm hot take. I think this set will be remembered as one of the all-time greats, but not by cubers. Unless you curate a rainbow cube or a Tarkir-themed cube, there are just way too many 3-colored gold cards to make much of an impact in the average cube. This will be remembered by Vorthos players and enfranchised enjoyers of Magic lore as the turning point before Universes Beyond invaded Standard. The biggest miss of this set for me will be the decision by Wizards to not feature this flavorful and powerful return to the plane of Tarkir at the Pro Tour. The idea of Javier Dominguez and Jean-Emmanuel Duprat sitting down to draft Final Fantasy at the highest level of professional Magic is agonizing. Speaking of which, where is the JED World Championship card? Give me Jean-Emmanuel riding a frickin' dragon. I know that hating on Universes Beyond is not a hot take. I know that Lord of the Rings was featured in the Pro Tour, but they played Modern, and being in Standard hits different. And it's looking like Worlds will be featuring Marvel's Spider-Man. It feels strange to be nostalgic in real time. Tarkir Dragonstorm is a legitimately cool set and limited format. The namesake cycle of uncommons are a highlight of the set. I particularly like Roiling Dragonstorm, and will be swapping it in as a blinkable chart a course that cares about dragons, and one of the coolest creature types in all of fantasy. I will remember this set for going all in on dragon flavor, the namesake Dragonstorm cards, and the end of an era. These upcoming releases are making me drastically reconsider how I interact with spoilers and curating my cubes. If anything, Tarkir Dragonstorm has given me a sense of urgency to tighten up my list, then batten down the hatches until this Universes Beyond storm blows over. In the meantime, always be cubing.
My hot take for Tarkir Dragonstorm is that even though it might be the only good old set we'll have this year, set on the Magic universe of fantasy, I don't really care about the set. I don't really care about the aesthetics. I don't really care about the mechanics. I think the mechanics are too similar to existing ones, with like a little twist that make them hard to remember and to read. I don't really like the big mid-rangey gameplay with 3 colors. I don't like big dragons. I'm not really into this. I don't like the art that is. I don't like the showcase borderless frame that is too black and not really readable. But that doesn't mean it's a bad set. I think it's a good set. I'm happy that we come back to something classic Magic, that there's way less puns and pop culture reference in the set. And I'm pretty sure it's a great design and people love it. And I'm happy for people who appreciate and enjoy it, clearly. But I'm just here to say that if you don't like the set, if there's no cards really for your deck, your cube, or anything in the set, you don't need to feel pressured by marketing, because this is the only good old Magic set this year. You don't need to buy Magic cards, don't need to buy booster boxes and to interact with the set you don't love. I'm sure we'll find great cards in it. I found Heritage Reclamation that I think is a good card. 1 and a green for an instant that exiles a card from a graveyard and draws a card, or can blow up an artifact and an enchantment. It's a power-up Return to Nature. I just feel Return to Nature as a more iconic name and art that I prefer, but I hope Heritage Reclamation will maybe have a different treatment in the future. The reprint, maybe. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Don't feel obliged to engage with the product you don't like just because this is the only good old Magic set we'll have this year.
Thus concludes our Tarkir Dragonstorm Cube set review. I think this set is honestly great for Cube in general. I know we talked about how a lot of the mechanics are maybe not super resonant in the abstract. They fit a lot more in the context of this plane and this set than they do in cubes in general, but also none of these mechanics are very obviously sort of insular the way that some mechanics often are in new sets, which means that it's hard to put, a toxic card in your cube, for example, because without more toxic cards, it kind of doesn't really make sense. That's not the case for any of these mechanics. It's really just maybe some mechanical, flavorful inelegance you have to grapple with. But if you like the cards, you can play them. And we also see a couple of, I think, really interesting novel designs, like Cori-Steel Cutter and Rotcurse Rakshasa, that are going to at least provide new and interesting space for cube designers that want to explore them, if not become sort of icons in their own right as years go on. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
I got to go message Trainmaster GT and see if it was in fact him that submitted those survey results so I can keep my little tirade against him in.
Yeah, I will co-sign any tirades.
I'm just
Don't mess
picturing
with my data.
It's just
I
too
am
bad
just
he got
picturing
banned from the
me
podcast.
as a big bully just trashing a beautiful model train set so viscerally in my head, just ripping up the rails, swinging them over around my head like a whip, and smacking it into a little tiny model of a train station.
Crushing all the tiny trees, emptying the pond.
Yeah, emptying the pond. I get a big straw and I suck up a little model pond, and then I spit it in your face, Trainmaster GT.
It was just resin. There's not real water in here.
Woo! All right. Anything else anybody wants to say to close this out?
Yeah, I want to thank all of our respondents. This couldn't happen without you. And even if one of you decided to grief the results, we're really glad to, have
We're
this
very
opportunity
grateful
with
for
our
most
community.
of you.
Which actually, I do want to say here, being a little bit serious.
Don't do that.
We're teasing Trainmaster GT. Trainmaster G is a friend of the show. Don't do this though. This really messes stuff up. And if you are not, just don't even try it. I was about to say if you aren't obvious enough about it, then it might sneak through. But I don't want you to be obvious enough about it that we have to manually clean this stuff up again. So Trainmaster GT actually gets a little bit of a pass for being the first and only one ever to do it. You may not do it ever again now. This is did you ever, years ago, the McElroy brothers had that podcast. The McElroy brothers will be in Trolls 2. It was a really interesting, weird thing they did.
It was. They did some interesting things over the years. That was kind of funny.
And I appreciate the experimentation, but what it effectively was, whether they intended it or not, was a huge flex of their privilege, because they just literally were like, we are three white guys, we're making a podcast saying we are going to be in this movie, and then it happened because they had enough influence and enough of a fan base that they managed to pull it off. And that was kind of weird performance art, I think maybe unintentionally. But there was one episode of that podcast which I loved, which is that one of their fans made a podcast that was called Emily will be on But My Brother and Me. And they had to eventually be okay, I guess, yes, we got to do it and be on our thing, so you get to also be on our podcast. And they were like, nobody else, though. This only works once. Nobody else can make a podcast saying Andy Manga will be on My Brother and Me and have it work. That will never work ever again. And that's what we're saying right now about you will not get a funny diatribe from me on air if you submit multiple fake survey results. You will just get scolded and maybe blocked from future surveys. So don't do it.
Don't do it.
And on that bombshell, that brings us to the end of a nearly 2-hour episode of Lucky Paper Radio. I'm so grateful that my weekend is gone as I edit all of this.
Perhaps you just enjoyed part 2 of
it has to come out this week because of the thing. Because next week,
split it up. We can do it non-contiguous.
No. That's no good. We can't do that. It's got to be this week. It's fine. We got to do 2-parters. It's too much. We can't keep it to 1 hour. It's impossible. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for submitting survey results. It's the only way we can do this, and it's fun to see everyone's perspectives on these cards. Make sure you check out the article and see the full detailed list of everyone's takes on these different cards from Tarkir Dragonstorm. All the music for this podcast is produced by DJ James Nassie. All the Magic cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast. This podcast is produced by Think Really Hard About Magic Cards and Speaking to Microphones About It. Anthony and Parker, thank you for the gift of friendship and for the gift of Cube.
Thank you for dying eggs with me. I hope to one day be able to make Pesenki with you, Parker, too.
All right. Look forward to it.
Yeah, I always thought I wasn't allowed to make Pesenki with Parker. Kennedy said no Pesenki.
No.